basically what was going on. And then later it started becoming like when I moved back to Delhi, it became a lot of Indian fusion music. And I think I used that as a way to sort of rediscover my Indian identity also. So like I started listening to
Right,
Indian Ocean and Shakti and a lot of Indian based artists
right,
who are in the indie music scene. And then since from then on, I started studying music. So it was like a lot of blues and R&B and then like head first into jazz while in music school.
right.
And big time to John Mayer too and all that kind of like blues pop stuff as well.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's interesting. And then, so since we're talking about like sort of the chronology, so then
Mhm.
after Delhi, then you straight away moved to Boston to study at Berkeley, or
No, I went to University of Toronto for a year.
okay, okay.
Yeah,
And
studying
that was
liberal
for
arts.
music or
No, that
something
was
else?
for like political science and history.
Okay,
And then I moved and then I transferred after a year to
interesting.
Boston to Berkeley. Yeah. But while
Okay,
I was there, I ended up meeting all. I just ended up having to like by coincidence was living in a dorm area with all the music students from the music faculty. Sort of just by coincidence. I think maybe in my interests, while I was filling out my interests, everything was
that's
just related to
interesting.
music.
Okay,
So like I think I was the only other person who like filled out all these music interests along with all the other music students. So I was just sharing a room with musicians and it was like all my friends were musicians and they like heavily informed my decision to like study music. Because until that
oh,
point, you don't know
okay.
what music education really is, especially if you're self-taught. And like my high
Ah,
school in Delhi obviously did not have, like,
right.
there's a lack of serious music education generally,
Hmm.
I would say, in Delhi. So especially at the time that I was living there.
Right.
Now, obviously, GMI exists,
No, we
but
have, yeah. Uh,
but yeah. So I didn't know what music theory was. I didn't know what serious private lessons were. I didn't know what having a faculty of musicians was like. But then when I finally got introduced to that, I was like, okay, this is like they have homework and stuff. Like
yeah,
they're
you
serious
have a lot of stuff
students.
to. You don't just
Yeah.
sit at home and just play guitar. That's not how it is.
Absolutely. Yeah,
You
and
have to
that's what I
you have
thought
a
it
lot.
was, and that's what everyone told me it was. So,
Wow. No, but that's
yeah.
very interesting because I mean I sort of presumed that you just wanted to study music because you were so passionate about music, when I had met you. And then obviously we had at that point also you were kind of exploring and I remember you were thinking about okay, what do I want to do? Do I want to explore studying? But I don't think it was really there on the sort of like on a forefront. Um, but I thought of sort of presumed that that would have been your kind of path. But this is interesting to hear that you actually went into another direction, and then because of the influence of all this music around you, and then you're seeing how valuable probably music education could be.
Hmm.
Um, so you sort of turned in that direction, which is quite amazing. So yeah, so
Yeah.
and then you sort of transferred to Berkeley.
Yeah, I transferred to Berkeley. Berkeley
Yeah,
was always a target. Like I had heard of it when I was, I think,
right.
14. I tried to apply when I was 15. Obviously, they sent me like I was on the admissions. I obviously like was trying to send the application when I was 15 years old. Got to the point where you had to pay the 150 application fee, and then I was like, okay, this is where the journey ends. So then I just didn't do it. But they kept me on their
Mailing
system,
list or
which I
whatever.
later
Yeah,
found out was because I ended up working at the admissions office while I was at Berkeley for like a student
interesting.
employment. So I know exactly what kind of kid I was because you just put them on the prospective student list for like 3 years
Right.
down the line because there are a lot of kids who apply to Berkeley way before they're even done with high
They're
school
ready.
because
Yeah.
they're just so obsessed with it. And I was one of those
Mm,
kids, but then it was just this like really distant dream. So I never really thought of doing it until I went to it was close enough geographically where I was like, okay, maybe I can go for like a summer program. Then I ended up
mm,
going for the summer program and then applying.
that's
Um,
nice.
but yeah, so after a year in Toronto, I decided with my parents were always super supportive. So they were like, if this is really what you want to do, then let's do it. Let's go for a summer program.
That's nice.
And then I went for like 3 months. And then while I was at Berkeley, I was actually filling the application form for Berkeley. So it's kind of a nice
Right.
way to apply to Berkeley while actually being there.
Right. You can sort of sample it and get a vibe and get a feel for the place,
Yeah,
obviously.
exactly. And I
Yeah.
got recommendation letters from all the teachers that I was there. It was, I made sure that I had really beefed up my application since I
That's
was
good.
there.
That's good.
And I met you there also that summer. I
Yeah.
mean, I don't know if
That
you remember, but this was ages ago. I met
probably.
Tarun for the
Yeah.
first time. I met you there. Like I was walking on
Nice.
the street on the beach, the Berkeley beach, and then I was like,
Yeah.
Aditya.
Amazing, man. It's quite amazing. And then again, full circle was when you brought your band back to GMI. and then we were able to workshop with our students, and then
Yeah,
it's amazing how things turn out, man. Like
I
it's
know.
it's
It really
quite
is.
cool.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
great again. And then it was
Yeah.
so amazing seeing you. Like we met at in Jaipur when you were touring for your latest EP.
Hmm.
So it's always great to see how music sort of runs in circles, and then we kind of keep finding points of interaction with all the musicians we meet along the way. It's just amazing.
Yeah, that's the best
So
part about just being
right,
in a community, in this community, is that you are constantly meeting in different points of your life and you exchanging sort
right,
of ideas and stuff. But it's not, it's just, yeah, it's so nice that you're always just rubbing shoulders with everybody. That's like
exactly.
the best
Yeah.
thing.
Great. And then, obviously Berkeley was, maybe you can share how that experience was. And I'm guessing like you met a lot of your musicians from your band, in Boston or New York, or, how was that whole process for you?
Yeah, Berkeley was incredible. It was everything that I had dreamed of going into it, you know, and they I remember like my mind being blown that like, oh my God, instead of like in the EPD labs, instead of like they along with their keyboards, they also have like music keyboards, like piano
Right.
keyboards, you know. It was just like a dream for any musician and
Exactly.
music
Yeah.
student who was like obsessed with music for like years and years and years and was like denied a lot of like, you know, like you don't really see that as a kid, you know, and
True.
unless you go to like an institution that provides all these things. So to see all this gear and all this tech and all this like seriousness associated with playing
Right.
modern music was incredible. So yeah, it was great. It was extremely rewarding, but also extremely difficult because you come from a everyone comes from this background that like, okay, I'm like the bee's knees in my local high school and I, you know,
Right. And then
I'm
you
the
hit
guitar
in, yeah.
player. And then you take this massive ego hit when you get to Berkeley because you're like, oh my God,
Exactly.
like every single person here is the best at what they do, and like all conversion is one place. And
Right.
then the best of the ones who are like revered as, you know, and so it's just like this. I don't know if everybody else felt it so much, but I definitely was in this constant state of like, I don't know, like major musical insecurity, you
Right. I
know.
mean,
But that
yeah,
pushes you a lot. But
definitely. Yeah. Yeah.
you know, but that's what I was. It was a kind of a balance between being like this is incredible and like oh my God, I have to work harder
Yeah. Right.
throughout my sort of 3.5 years there. But I met Brian, who's the sax player in my band, and who's my roommate for many years after in New York,
Nice.
at Berkeley. And then I ended up meeting and Jared also, who's the other both sax players I met, and then I ended up just meeting the rest of those guys in New York, but through the Berkeley connection.
Nice. Yeah, man, they're all such amazing musicians and great guys. So yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
just say hi from
I
my end
will.
to
Yeah,
them.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, man. So again, how did your sort of sound develop? Because you've kind of created and crafted your own sound as a guitar player and composer. And
Hmm.
how did sort of like who were your influences at that point? Because obviously, I can so hear. Like I was checking out Storm and Dust, you have that whole rock sort of thing happening, but then you have harmonic a lot of harmonic sort of chances that you take, which obviously are coming from different other influences, and then a lot of the world sort of sounds with Middle Eastern and Indian flavors. So how did sort of that come around in your music, and when did you start writing this kind of a style of your own sort of music?
Yeah, I think it was. I suppose it started at Berkeley, but I mean, anything you do kind of informs your playing, kind of bleeds into your playing at various stages of your
Right.
musical career. But at Berkeley, I kind of head first like dove into jazz and modern jazz.
Hmm.
Partly because it was what everyone who was amazing at Berkeley was like playing jazz. So you're like, this is the thing that
Kind of good. Yeah.
And so then I did that, and I didn't necessarily resonate with um, like older or traditional jazz, especially bebop, right away because it's something that I think you need to be entrenched in. Like there's a big cultural aspect of it, there's a big historical aspect, there's a big like geographical aspect to it too. Like if you
True.
live close to New York City, you're just exposed to it and there's weight in it. But if you don't, bebop can lose some of that because there's so much social commentary within just the music itself. So like if you miss that, you actually end up missing what the music is really about.
Yeah.
So I was resonating a lot more with modern jazz that had influences from indie rock and things that I was already sort of accustomed to hearing. And so then having this music like I remember Invisible Cinema, which was big for both of us because I think we
Exactly.
talked
Yes.
about it.
Yes. Yes.
But Aaron Parks' record, I remember listening to um, uh, Nemesis, that song that was
Right.
in Seven, and like it's got this like really lush harmony. That was kind of this like, oh my God, like you can have this rock kind of sensibility, this like rock angsty kind of sound, but also explore like really lush harmony that isn't
Harmony.
necessarily
Right.
diatonic or isn't necessarily limited to playing power chords or something. Which there's nothing wrong in playing power chords, but it's just there's a lot more to music that you can explore also if you'd like
Exactly.
to.
Yeah.
And so that was a big turning point where I started to sort of go into that. So it was Aaron Parks and Kurt Rosenwinkel, Gerard Hexelman, Julian Lage, all those guitar players who
Right.
sort of, I think, stand right on the boundary between jazz and things that are maybe not as influenced by jazz or not
Exactly.
directly influenced by jazz. So that
Right.
was a good place for me to sort of exist while also kind of putting my foot in and playing and learning just more traditional, older styles of jazz. And over time, I've come to really appreciate just being able to play like a standard in its truest form. I don't think I can do it with enough conviction as someone who's been doing it for a lot longer than I have, but I really am now trying to practice that a lot more just for myself.
Exactly. Yeah.
Um, but just because I enjoy the sound. But yeah, that's
Yeah.
sort of what it was. It was
Plus, you
always
live
just
in New
like,
York, so
and I live in New York, so like you hear
yeah.
it all the time,
Exactly.
and it's an
Yeah. Yeah.
important part of the city's history. So
Right. Yeah. And I mean, and like as you mentioned, like obviously having that sort of rock, the kinds of emotion that you can present with that style, but then using sort of more adventurous harmony and then using it as a vehicle for improvisation that also has its own sort of
yeah,
sort of kick to it, and then you enjoy that as well in a very different
yeah.
sort of way, and that can open up a lot of different kinds of avenues as well, right.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I feel it there's I I think from any genre there's always things you can take from the genre that are really really kind of key like hallmarks of
Right.
the genre. So like from rock music I very much found the way to sort of really to dig in and kind of be dirty with your tone and with your sound and with your even with your playing and timing and stuff like
Yeah.
a lot of that really adds character to the sound. And with jazz what I really took away was this like idea of just being like super free and spontaneous
Mm.
and being getting really comfortable in being like wrong, quote unquote. So like you make a mistake and it's not like, oh my god, the whole band is totally lost.
Right.
You make a
Right.
mistake
Right.
and they just kind of like dig it, either like just dig it, hammer on into the mistake so that it just makes it like, and that is a really, really freeing way to approach playing music. And then also from jazz, there's just this whole rich history of music theory and harmony, whether it was implicitly, studied or explicitly sort of thing. It's always been a very complex way to approach harmony in music theory,
Hmm.
which I haven't found in too many other styles of music aside from things that birthed this genre of jazz that we sort of know
Yeah.
today.
True.
So, like you don't, I remember it, like it doesn't exist in punk rock or pop music as much where you are really stretching the limits of what you can do in music theory.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's not this emphasis, which is fine, but that isn't the emphasis in those contexts. But with jazz, it has now become into this place where you can be a student of music theory and write music. And I love that. I love this idea that you can explore music theory and find new things, almost like you're like a researcher or something. And I love that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That is definitely, and we're seeing a lot more, sort of improvising musicians or jazz musicians stretching those boundaries. Like maybe 30 years back, everybody was just sort of playing standards, and they were like, okay, how can we sort of learn this vocabulary, which is obviously beautiful, and there's a lot that we can learn from it. But I mean, recently I'm seeing a lot of trends where people are coming out as composers, and then they're sort of creating their own niche and their own sound using all those influences and all
Hmm.
these sort of vehicles, which is quite amazing actually.
Yeah, I
So it's
love
great to
that.
see, yeah, where
Yeah,
it's all
yeah,
headed. So
absolutely, absolutely.
definitely. So yeah, in fact, like you released an EP, Becoming, earlier this year. So maybe you can
Mhm.
talk about how is like what was the process like, and was it were there some things which were kind of different from what you've done before, or something special about that, and how has the process been? Because I think you released it, and then uh, the pandemic hit the world. So
Mhm.
how has that sort of
Yeah,
affected what happened after that?
yeah, yeah. Becoming was released in February, and then the pandemic started in March. In between those two moments, we were able to tour India. And that was the
Right.
only place we actually played Becoming live. I think actually, barring two cities in the U. Barring we played a show at Yale and a show in Boston. and that was it. And then
Wow.
we went to India for 2 weeks, and then that was it. That was the beginning and end of our becoming tour.
Oh
um,
man. And you
but
did have a like you did have quite a few shows planned up
we
after
had a
that,
bunch of
right?
shows this summer. Yeah,
Yeah.
we had some touring this
Mm,
summer, and then we had some festivals this summer too. Um, some of them became virtual, and then the others will hopefully just kind of reschedule for next time. But we
right.
were able to tour last year in the U.S. in November, which was good. But we were playing basically a lot of the same songs because by that time we had basically recorded everything.
Right.
But yeah, it wasn't like a formal release of the EP.
Yeah.
But the EP was it's called Becoming because it's about embracing, very much embracing your past self. And as a musician who started to play like serious music and started learning music in a serious format, I found in order for me to really get serious about music, I had to do a lot of rejection of this like music that I used to play, as a kid and stuff, for many years, and I was kind of just like, okay, that stuff is like when you're a child, you don't really mess with that anymore. Now this is the serious stuff that you get
Serious.
into,
Yeah.
and I did that for ages, and I was very happy doing that too. But then I think for this EP, I was like, okay, let me see what it would be like if I wrote music today, just also having all this old like influence from when I'm age 11 to age whatever 16, 17. Like those are really formative years in your music,
Definitely. Yeah.
and your guitar playing and stuff. So then I listened to a lot of old records, like the Blink records and Boxcar Racer records and stuff for about a
Wow.
year while I was writing that music, just to really get like back in touch with that stuff. And it really, it really like it was kind of a cathartic experience to like bring that
Wow.
into my like modern day playing. So it's almost like if I had brought like 14-year-old Shub and put him now with all this music experience that I have now, what would you write like? And that's
Yeah.
sort of what ended up happening was I was uninhibited and I just wrote like it was okay, this section needs power chords, then so be it. It needs like palm muted
Exactly.
chords or distortion, then that's what I'm gonna do. I'm not gonna shy away from it, thinking that oh my god, what'll people say if this is not jazz and this is not whatever. So I just kind of let that sort of go, and that was the whole idea behind the EP was like, embrace this many years of playing guitar alone in your room, trying to like figure it out. Just put a lot of that energy into an EP, and that's what it was.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, because at one point when you embrace sort of all your I don't know, past selves or shadow selves and all of that, when you sort of bring all of that in, and I think when you were able to channel that creatively, I think that's a very, as you said, a cathartic process. And
Yeah,
I mean that EP sounds amazing, man. Like
thank you.
just the overall sound of it, the writing and the playing is just amazing. So
Thanks,
congratulations
man.
on that, man.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks.
looking forward to more music from you.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
amazing. So and so overall, like for example, you know this period has been tough for everybody around the world. So how
Mhm.
has the last few months been for you?
It's sort of been up and down. Some days are great, and then some days you're like existential crises are sort of occurring.
Right.
But which is fine. It is a global pandemic, so there's going to be so many just ups and downs in how you feel about things. I'm obviously extremely grateful that I'm safe and everybody around me
Yeah.
is more or less safe. But yeah, aside from the just being at home and being safe part, from a work front, it's been obviously slow because most of the work we do is live
Yeah.
performances. Um, but all my teaching is online, and I have used this time to jump right into a new album, which I was planning for a
Oh,
little bit
okay.
later, but I've
Wow.
just started to write music for a new record.
That's good. That's good.
And so that I can now release it in summer 2021. That's the goal. So I've kind of
Okay.
pushed up that goal from
Push
I think it
that.
was maybe later in the year 2022. Now we've just brought it up. So I've just used this time to just write and work on my own stuff, which surprisingly you don't get a lot of time to do, or you really have to carve it out of your day as
Right.
sort of working musician because you're doing so many other things that of course you would know.
Exactly.
And so I've been able to sort of just actually focus on that for extended periods of time, which has been
That's
quite great.
good to hear. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and talking about teaching, those of you who are joining us, Shubh is presenting a course. It's a 4-week course called Artist in Your Residence. So we're presenting that and starting next week. He's designed it really beautifully. He's going to take us through his influences, his guitar playing, and his writing process. So maybe, yeah, Shubh, you can sort of run us through what are you going to cover in that course, so
Yeah.
that yeah, people can just kind of get an idea about that. Yeah.
Hmm. So the course we are thinking is the rudimentary thing that I designed was we decided on a 4 week course, and so I decided to split my sort of idea of what I think music in a rough way into four different things, what I think music entails in four different ways. So my approach, the first week will be my approach to guitar playing and guitar technique. Not really limited to guitar specific stuff, but just things that I've used in the way I visualize music from a performer's perspective, basically as a guitar player. So it is very much you can be a non-guitar player and I think hopefully draw some inspiration
Definitely.
from it. And then the second week is music theory and harmony, and my approach to how I use music theory in a sort of in a practical way. Not to say it's never ever impractical, but in a much more like performance writing oriented way. So
Right.
how I visualize theory and how important it is to analyze things, but when you should also start that process and that kind of stuff. And then you working with modes and basic analysis that always helps any musician. And then the
Right.
third week is writing and production and how I write and how I prepare my demos for my band and for myself.
That's good. Yeah.
So kind of a half production thing, but mostly just how I approach writing and the habits of sort of try to create for myself in writing, and then obviously the technicalities of actually writing music. And then the last week, which is the fourth week, is leading a band and what sort of it all the things that come with being a band
Right.
leader and starting your own project really. And a lot of that I've found is you have to be hyper creative, but also you have to be hyper organized too.
True.
And that is actually something that I don't think people, and I'm sure most music, like all musicians have realized the importance of it, but I don't think a lot of people generally realize the importance of how organized you have to be as a creative person.
Exactly. And then you have to,
And
I mean, a lot of us struggle with that. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And I struggled with it. Struggle with it today. Obviously, all of us do. I've tried to find ways to basically kind of uh, create a way in my time scheduling and the
Exactly.
ways I approach things to make it so that I can be creative every day for certain amounts of time and stuff. And so there's talk about that basically.
That's
That
nice.
would be
Yeah,
the
it'll be
last
nice
week.
to, yeah, because I do like to, talk to people about how they sort of, live their life as a musician, and carve out different, time for different kinds of things, and also keep pushing their boundaries, and so that'll be nice to hear, from you,
Yeah,
and if you can detail that out for us, that'll be amazing.
yeah.
So, yeah,
And then
and
during the week, we'll be doing like assignments, and then I'll be on kind of checking. People will be uploading the assignments, and I'll be checking them and commenting them, and hopefully create some kind of like a commenting almost community where you have this like group of people each
exactly,
week for
yeah,
4 weeks that you are in touch with. Like a virtual classroom, but
virtual classroom,
it's
yes.
you can keep uploading things, and so I've designed certain assignments that will help, and hopefully I've tried to keep it as usable and practical as possible. So jumping right into what you would, just things you want to just explore as a musician instead of
Right,
things
right,
being too sort of high level, trying to
right.
break it down and maybe a little bit more practical.
That's amazing. Yeah. So yeah, so for everybody, I think the way we've designed this is it's not just for sort of live sessions where we're just giving you a bunch of information. Obviously, we're going to be doing that, and we've curated each session in a very specific way. But what we're also going to be doing is each week we're going to be giving you additional material, like let's say we're talking about harmony and chord vocabulary, so we might give you some guitar related shapes and some other stuff which you can apply on, even if you're a piano player or any other instrumentalist. We may have you send in assignments, send in, like, depending on what we're talking about each week, you can send us your kind of recordings, and we can give you feedback. So it's a great way for you to have sort of like a workshop space with Shub for entire month, where you can be in
Hmm.
touch with him, and we can sort of build this community together. So we're really looking forward to that. So we hope a lot of you can join us, and
Yeah,
kind of explore this musical journey with us. So yeah,
yeah,
great, man. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I end up getting a lot of messages, people sending me their music and asking me what they think, and I usually reply and listen to the music and stuff. But there's sometimes you're unable to listen or whatever. So this is also a good opportunity. Hopefully, I can use this as a way to like really people can just send and upload whatever what they're working on, and then you can kind of just workshop it with either me or
Exactly.
with
Yeah.
everybody else, and
Yeah.
have this sort of
You
really open forum for about like a
right.
month where you and I would mostly because I wish I could also do that with my musical friends and stuff, would just upload music. And actually I plan on doing that for this new record. Part of the process for writing this new music for the record is showing it to as many people as I can, behind closed doors, so I can get as much of like people's opinions as possible.
That's nice.
So
Yeah.
that's also what I think we plan to do for this course as well.
Yeah. Really looking forward to it, man.
Yeah,
And
me too.
exactly. So it's going to be quite exciting. So now I can see there's a whole bunch of questions. Some have just posted them right now, and some had sent their questions to us on Instagram. So maybe I'll just sort of go over them, and then you can sort of do it like a Q&A round. Yeah.
Sure.
So,
Yeah.
okay. So the first one is what's Shub's process of writing in odd time and also his process of composing melodies?
That's a great question. So my process of writing an odd time is the odd time never really comes before the idea. I usually let the idea dictate what time it's going to be in or
Right.
signature it's going to be in. I do a lot of like arpeggiation and stuff on the guitar, and so it that stuff lends itself to having phrases that don't necessarily add up, in four. So if there's like an arpeggio of like 7 notes and then an arpeggio of 5 notes and then an arpeggio of like 4 notes, you have like a nice kind of like uneven sort of feeling where you're jumping between different things. So that's how I end up writing a lot of my music. Off late now, I've been exploring a lot of like for the past maybe 2 years, kind of what polyrhythms feel like and how they imply
Mm,
certain sort of feelings. And that I've been messing around with. So there are some songs that originated from a polyrhythmic idea that I was playing, but it always is the idea first, so it's always messing around on the guitar, and then realizing, okay, this is in this time signature. And then I think the
right.
way that happens is if you just listen to music that it is in that kind of signatures, you get
Yeah.
comfortable in that sound. So that when you do play it, it's not like, whoa, this is wrong, gotta add another note. When you're playing it, you're like, oh, actually, this sounds reminiscent of something that I listened to from Tidwal
True,
Hamasi,
true.
and I quite like this, so I'm gonna keep working on it. And I think that's how you end up writing an odd time signature, is just listening to it and messing around on your. And for
Great.
melodies, a lot of melodies I try to be as organic as possible. Of course, there's some working out after you analyze the progression. You need to hit certain notes that imply certain things and certain emotions. But for the most part, I try to be as like try to make them as singable as possible. So I'll like sing a lot of the melodies before while I'm playing it. And if that's too hard, then I'll record it and then try to
Record it. Yeah.
jam over the progression. For any like really pretty melodies, I always just hear the sound of like more Indian inflections and
Hmm.
phrasing and stuff. So that's how some of my phrasing is more inspired by Indian folk music, classical music, and sort of Arabic folk music. Just because to me, that's what when I think of a beautiful melody, that's what it sounds like. I think because in music like that, the melody is given like this, almost like this reverential treatment where like how you phrase the melody and how you approach a note from whether it's from below or above or you're pulling off or you're
Right.
hammering on or like there's so much emphasis and respect given to each note within the melody that it lends itself to being really pretty. So that's how I end up writing a lot of my melodies
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
envisioning how I want to like what I want to say with this melody.
That's beautiful, man. And how do you go about naming your compositions? That's an interesting question.
Oh, that's a good question. It comes from a lot of things that I end up reading or coming across. But for Hamira and Had, it was a lot of reading that I was doing at the time.
Mm,
Just out like you go through phases of books and one leads you to another. So at the time, I was doing a lot of reading about religion and comparative religion and like the history of religion and stuff. And I found that very fascinating. I'm not particularly religious myself, but I just found the whole idea of spiritualism an interesting thing to study about. So a lot of Hamira and Had is deeply influenced by that.
okay.
Um, and then becoming was I decided to in the past my titles have been extremely complicated. Becoming was the opposite, where I was like I want only one word, very specific, very one word titles to describe each song,
Hmm.
and so that's what Becoming was
Interesting.
was going the other direction of being as simple as I can. saying
Hmm.
as little as I can, but while implying as much as I can. So,
Pretty cool. Pretty cool. All right. The next question is, what are the technical challenges of having two drummers, and why do you have two drummers in the band?
um, because why not? Is, is the answer.
That's a good. Okay.
Um, the technical challenges are that, of course, you need two drummers that are super locked in. But more than the ability to lock in, you need two drummers that have zero ego or very little ego about how they approach playing, because like so much of the two drummer thing is giving and taking, and at
Mm.
some point one drummer is always taking a supportive role and then the other drummer is taking the sort of more forward motion role, and then it always switches, and it's kind of like a ebb and flow of those two things. So you
Mm.
have to have two human beings who are very open to those ideas, and Josh and Angelo and Sean, who played with us in India, are like three examples of amazing humans who have the ability to be like, yeah, I'll support you on this, you go for it.
Mm.
And then the other person be like, yeah, you know what, I'll support you, you go for this section. And that's happening conversationless, it's just
Right.
happening while you're playing. Of course, there's a lot of rehearsal that goes into it, but like, a lot of those spontaneous decisions are made on the fly. But why I have it is because we had Angelo playing drums and Josh playing percussion on Hamira, on the first record we recorded. And then Josh started playing percussion with us live, which he wasn't doing before. And then I think at one show he had to sub in on drums, get Angelo could make it. And so he learned the whole repertoire on drums. And so I was like, dude,
Oh,
what if
okay.
you just played like snare and kick also, just to beef it up? And then slowly we just started adding one tom by tom. We
Mm.
just added a whole drum
Tom
set.
by Tom. That's
And by like 'cause we were playing this monthly Rockwood show. This is Rockwood is a club in New York in the Lower East
right.
Side, and we were playing there monthly. And so by the end of 6 months, it was basically two drum sets playing at any given time. And then we just love the sound of it because there's just
Yeah.
this, the drums in itself are like seven instruments in one. So having 14 instruments of percussion is like,
Definitely. Yeah.
it's such a cool sound. You just have to have the people who are willing to make it work. But if you do
Right.
have two people who are willing to make it work, then it's really actually quite easy.
Yeah. Great. Okay, and we have a couple of questions, so I'm going to club a few, and I apologize that if we don't get through all the questions because we have a long list, and we're sort of running out of time in a few minutes. So there is a question which says, somebody saw your Instagram story about rough voice notes. So how do you go about arranging in a more elaborate way? Is that certain ideas come up while jamming, or they are sort of usually thought by yourself? And I know that you're going to cover your whole process in the course in detail. It's harder to talk about this, but maybe if you want to address the question.
Yeah, that's a good question. I use voice notes a lot. Or any recording thing, but
Mm,
voice notes are so quick because you always have your phone next to you. So I do a lot of voice notes, and then I just capture the initial idea so I don't forget it, and then I'll almost immediately transfer that onto like my DAW, which is
mm,
Logic. Of DAW, my preference, which is Logic, and it comes from jamming, but I try to write as much of the meat as I can without having a recording, without having like a DAW in front of me, because I feel like it's easy to start looping things, and then you just end up creating one section and you just
right.
layer one
Yes.
section a lot. It doesn't do a lot of horizontal motion, it just has this vertical motion of music making. So I tried to do as much as the horizontal thing. So you have like an A section and a rough B section and a rough
Mm,
whatever next section. Um, so I tried to create a roadmap, very, very rough roadmap along the way, just with the guitar or just with whatever instrument I'm using. And then I put that down into a digital audio workstation.
right.
And then start layering and start adding things. And then from then on, it's a whole process of figuring it out.
True. Great. Now we have a couple of questions about your influences, so I'm going to club them together. So they're asking about your Indian artists who've influenced you. Is there specific rock guitarists who influenced you? And then again with guitar players, was there somebody who was a big inspiration for you for your guitar tone or sound?
Oh,
So sort of
interesting.
club together, yeah.
Cool. So the Indian musicians, Remember Shakti is and always will be huge. I know John McLaughlin is not Indian, but he's like an honorary Indian. Um, and Indian Ocean was huge for me, and a lot of the fusion bands from that era of Indian fusion music. I'm not saying this to just be complimentary, but Aditya Balani was a huge
Oh,
influence. I'm not even kidding.
okay, that's
Um,
amazing to hear, man.
because at the time I was like wanted to go to Berkeley, and you were like one of the few Indian guitar players at Berkeley. If I think like if maybe the only. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but
There
yeah.
were
So
few, but they were like we were like a small group,
a
at that
small
time.
thing,
Yeah,
yeah. But I
yeah,
remember
yeah,
listening to your record, and you were like the guy, who's making this like fretless guitar music. So
yeah.
yeah, for sure you.
Thank you.
And then now it's there's so many awesome indie artists. Like we've been working with Dhruv Viswanath a lot, and he's
Right.
like
Yeah, yeah.
so killing.
Great.
Chayan Smithy, we have a lot of friends in a lot of bands like Bakshi. Some just really
That's
amazing
great.
bands who are just doing so many cool things. There's so many that I will forget to
Yeah.
talk about. Um, in terms of what was the next question?
Rock guitar. So yeah, in
Raw
terms of
guitar
rock
players
guitar players and like guitar players who
and guitar players.
for your sound, who influenced you for your sound.
So raw guitar players, I would say, I guess, like within the prog world, it's probably Tosin Abasi,
Ah,
because he's just killing. And there's a few others, but definitely him. I don't listen to a lot of prog generally, but it's if I had to, it would be him. And for guitar players who have influenced my sound, I would say Julian Lage has probably had the biggest influence on my sound. I know he doesn't play. Well,
he's
he might play.
amazing.
He plays a telly now, but
Yeah,
um, it just his tone and his approach to playing the guitar and how dynamic he is. He's sort of, I think, everything that is perfect about guitar
yeah,
playing. And
amazing.
Kurt Rosenwinkel, but
Kurt Russell.
probably Julian Lage for sure. Yeah.
Great. All right. Now, let me see. Maybe a couple of more questions. Um, so this is interesting because what is your relationship with social media as an artist? Because I mean, you're quite active and like you have a sort of a great way of like how you develop that. So what is your relationship with social media? That's a good question.
That's a really good question. Wow, that's a very good question. My
I know.
relationship, personally, like everyone, feel like I use Instagram and Facebook and stuff way too much. Um, but it's a difficult balance that you have to strike because you have to do it for your job, for your whatever,
Yeah,
for your brand recognition or whatever you'd like to call it. But you're doing it for work, so I never really post for personal reasons. However, I am on Instagram a lot of the day for non-personal
mm,
reasons, for non-business reasons. But I try to post as frequently as I can. Of course, in the pandemic, my whole routine of how I post has sort of become a little thing. And there's been so much happening around the world aside from the pandemic, especially in the US, that I found it quite tone deaf to post about myself. While
true. I
people
get
have been
that.
posting
Yeah.
about the Black Lives Matter movement and many other things. I have tried not to crowd Instagram with my own stuff. So I've let sort of people who have been posting about these things continue to post about these things. So I took quite a long break from it, and now I'm starting to post again slowly. But I've
Mm,
tried to just post things, clips, and things that I find interesting aside from just promotional things. I've tried to just post things that I would think I want to see. But yeah, that's a very good question. I've thought about it a lot,
right.
but I don't think it's an interesting thing where musicians have to strike a balance between the two. The apps aren't designed to be able to do a lot of work. The apps are designed to suck you in and keep you there. So it's very hard to think of it as a job because
True.
it's so distracting by the nature of its
By the
its
nature, yeah. I think
its
it's
creation.
yeah
So
built
yeah,
for that.
it's built for that. Yeah, it's built
Yeah.
for you to not do any work. But when that becomes your work, it's very weird. So yeah.
That's very interesting. Yeah. Let me post a video of my new song, and then you're just doing some
Oh
completely
yeah,
different.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah. And then the
yeah.
reward system, if you're looking at how many likes you got in comments,
Yeah.
it's all extremely important and informative. But I would also say it's probably quite unhealthy. So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I agree with you. Like striking a balance is sort of the key because sometimes it can sweep you away in a very different direction, and then, it can sometimes keep you away from your maybe your real goals as an artist.
Yeah,
But again,
exactly.
that's a
Yeah,
conversation probably for another time.
yeah.
Yeah, and I think maybe we can just end with this question, which is interesting. Do you practice rhythm on a percussion instrument?
Oh, that's a really good question. I don't no, I don't practice on a percussion instrument. I definitely do it on the guitar.
Right.
So any polyrhythms I'm working out, I'll try to do between my fingers as an exercise. But if I'm working things out, like there's certain things that I've had to hear in context, and I'll do it on, like, I'll just draw it on a MIDI piano roll. But if there's like a weird sort of like a 5 against 7 thing, and you want to try to like figure what it really sounds like, and you want to hear it perfectly quantized, I'll do it on Logic or something.
On Logic, yeah.
But otherwise, I'll practice any rhythmic ideas probably on the guitar, not
On the
really on a
guitar. So
percussion
you sort
instrument.
of translate them into your, your
Yeah,
on your own instrument.
yeah,
That's great. Amazing. Wow. Thank you, Shub, for being with us today
yeah.
and
Thank you for
sharing
having me.
so much about your life and what you're doing as an artist. And everybody here, thank you for joining us today. And we hope to see some of you in the course next week. And in any case, stay in touch. Keep writing to
Mhm.
us. We're always here, and hope to see all of you soon. Great. Once again,
Yeah.
thanks. All right. So
Thank
we'll
you everyone for
thank you,
tuning
man.
in. Yeah,
So we log off now. All right.
cool.